Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it stands alone. But if that grain is buried, it will sprout, it will reproduce and yield 30, 60, or even 100-fold. This was said by Christ. And when I was younger and used to read it, I used to always think about the human being dying, that this was like what you felt at a funeral. You know, the soul of the person returning back to where it was sent. And then some form of increase. I never connected the dots. I was much younger. But now I see that it's the plant being buried in the ground, the seed. That plant analogy is not for the human body. That plant analogy is for the human attention. So what happens is we have to die to things that we may possibly disagree with, more than likely disagree with. It's outcomes. These are the things that have to die if we want to change or expand on something. So the outcome is the result of something. You can grovel and grope and moan about what the outcome is, or you can produce the spiritual and mental income. You have to let something come in. You have to go within. See, your body is the ground that the seed is buried in. The seed is the idea. The seed is the thought. That thought reproduces itself, but not when it's results oriented in terms of looking at the results as they already are. You have to go back within. You have to bury that seed. You don't leave the seed on top of the soil. And that's what it means to just look at things and judge life by the outward experiences only, rather than applying the inward experiences and the inward imaginations and allowing that to bear effect, respond to what your outcome is. Your income determines your outcome. We're not talking about money, but what comes in determines what goes out. What comes in and what stays in determines what goes out. So you have to allow that idea that may have been rejected. You have to allow that circumstance that you don't necessarily agree with. And just like myself and all the rest of us, the human struggle involves that balance of income and outcome. What comes in, what goes out. And to manage this, we have to know what the seed, what its function is and how it reproduces. Because we know that the human body can't reproduce itself once it dies. It just goes into the soil to nourish the ground in those forms. But it's not going to, again, become a breathing spirit from the dissolution of the corpse. So, but the seed, however, does reproduce itself. It started off as a seed, and that seed grew into a plant or a vegetable on the tree. And once that thing fell off, even if no one eats it, especially if no one eats it, that's the analogy here, that no one dissolves what this fruit or this grain is. So your seed cannot be devoured by anyone else. And when we talk about thought seeds, and we'll use another analogy perhaps in another video about Satan being able to swoop down and take seeds that are sown along the surface of the path, ideas being stolen on the surface. Well, I'll break it down right there. The seeds can be taken from you if they're not buried in, if they're not planted in. So the adversarial nature and the doubts and the contradictions and the unbelievability of what it is you may try to do, that can be seeds that's scattered along the path. But you have to bury the seed in your heart. You have to bury the seed in your mind. This is why a lot of times they talk about not allowing people to know what your dreams and your goals are, because that leaves your seed exposed to the ground. Now, if you're fast enough to bury it back within you, and you only gave them a sliver of what it is that you're doing and not the full plan, and you're not under the auspices that they would steal from you, that seed can be protected. But once that seed goes into the ground, the same cycle of life goes around again. The seed goes into the ground. It grows up. It becomes something that falls off the tree, goes back into the ground, dies. The seed comes back up. That's how thoughts are. That's how ideas are. They continue to recycle. Income, outcome, income, outcome, income, outcome. That's how you look at an idea. Say income. whatever your idea is, whatever your thought is, whatever your inspiration is. You're a visionary. You have brilliant ideas, brilliant thoughts. But it's those ones that don't get buried that we usually tend to forget. And you can bury it by writing a note down sometimes. Sometimes you have to write it down. Sometimes you have to text it down, put it in your notes in order to bury that seed fast, because the distractions of life can cause that seed to get lost and it won't become what it was when you come back to it. That does happen to ideas. They can diminish. So you have a crop, you have a seed that cannot be taken, on average. On average, it cannot be taken. You would have to leave it exposed and give it away. But once it's buried within you, it's 100% safe. So you germinate that seed, and somebody may come and hack down your plant of a vision while it's still trying to sprout. They'll throw some shade. But let that thing sprout and turn into a plant and a tree and eventually spread into a forest. They're not going to be able to chop down a whole forest with their little bitty machete, with their machete of opposition, with their intellect trying to cut people down, whose teeth and jaws are like swords to cut down the poor and the needy, is what the oppressor is described as in the scriptures. Protect your seed. This not only extends to children, of course, but protect your seed. Protect the core of what you're about. Don't sell out, because what you're going to give out when you sell out is your soul, your seed, yourself. And you want to germinate that, because your conscience will continue to reproduce itself, especially if you subscribe to the whole reincarnation idea. There's a lot of schools of thought that do subscribe to that. So in that instance, the human body, in terms of the human spirit, not the human body, but the human spirit, does reproduce itself or add on and go on infinitely and expansively. So we're always being called to reproduce something. And what we're dealing with now in a lot of realms of entertainment is a reproduction that may have ran its course. We may need a whole nother team, a whole new wave of reproducers. Because to produce something would make it genuinely new, and nothing is really new. It just takes on different forms. So it'll be a reproduction of anything. It'll be a reproduction of a central idea. A reproduction of the all singular thought that spawned everything from beginning to end into existence on both sides of eternity and beyond the confines of it. So protect your seed, but you have to plant it within yourself. Don't give your seed away to your friends, because what if they're not your real friends? And don't give your seed away. Grow it. And once that plant starts to grow, protect that. The tree is straight. Just keep everybody off your property. When your seed or your idea blossoms and becomes a tree, by that time you have enough resources physically to provide protection for yourself, so that your garden and your forest is secure. But while it's still a seed, you're going to have to be the first and last line of defense for the most part. So there it is. If you want to grow, you have to go inside yourself.